Starting. All right, we are live. It's yours, babe.
All right, let's do this. Okay, so we're going to each take turns. Have you read through the questions that you need to discuss? And we're going to listen to it. And then when we've each had our turn, so kind of keep mental notes. So therefore we can go ahead and discuss them. Or would you like to discuss after a presentation?
It might be easier to discuss after the presentation, I'm thinking.
I think so.
Sounds good.
Okay, so guys, do you want me to go over the questions again so you know what you're going to focus on?
Yes.
All right. So you're going to be briefly sharing some of the points of your interview. Please do not discuss the name or who you talked to or their children. But after doing the interview, what is your sense of normal now? And what does normal mean? Did you find that the parents were often the last to know that their child was delayed or there was a problem? And how did they come to the awareness? Did you get a sense of whether or not parents were receptive to receiving services? And did you get a sense that parents were uncomfortable or had a sense of denial or shame, embarrassment related to their child's special needs? Or did they feel a sense of resolution or acceptance and had a long-term a long-term plan for dealing with their child's needs? So that's what we're going to go ahead and do. Let's see. And we'll keep time, so you need about 5 to 10 minutes on that.
Wow.
So anybody want to volunteer to go first?
Or do you want to just assign?
Well, I'll start, and then we'll go with Lisa, and then Lydia, and then Susan. How's that?
Perfect.
Okay, I'll go ahead and start then. So some of the things that we talked about was the little guy had some speech pattern development issues. He had balance problems. So he was 3.5, 4, and he had qualified for a preschool program through the schools. And then they had started working with his an OT, so an occupational therapist, and his mom was kind of concerned about that. She's like, he seems to be doing fine. But then her doctor started having her fill out all kinds of parent interview forms to see if he could stand on one foot, can he say these many words, can he remember these things? And again, no. They eventually found out he had a small tumor in the back of his brain near the spinal cord that was affecting a great deal. He's this really skinny, always moving kid, so tendencies of ADHD, so they weren't sure where he was going because of that. They did have to go ahead and, they did get that removed. Unfortunately, it didn't affect the brain per se, but it was near the motor skills and the fine motor skills, so he still had speech, but he's now 7, and he's not in the occupational therapy anymore. Normal, I think, is all a sense of where you are, what your life is if normal, because crazy is normal at my house, so it's all very different. This is their only child. They haven't been able to have any other children, but for them, their normal is every year, once a year, they go to California. They have to get all these tests and MRIs, and he calls that the bumper car. Because they have to keep checking to make sure that this is not coming back. The parents were definitely last to know, to realize it. She was very shocked, like, what? No, nothing's wrong, everything's okay. But then understanding how it all affected each other, she's like, okay, it's part of what we are. So they waited a year even to start him in kindergarten to give him that time to catch up, which was very good for him. And then they, at first there was definitely the being uncomfortable. There was the unhappiness because, it's a lot of work and you worry and you want you want your children to be wonderful and perfect and have no issues. But then she realized, it's okay. It doesn't make them horrible. It's a good thing. We can move forward. And so they work intensely with him with reading, and he does not love it, but it's something that, she finds ways to motivate him. And now they can look and see, okay, so how does this affect the rest of his life? And he'll be going into second grade, so he's, catching up. And so that's very good for them. And then, let's see. So her concern also is that her husband was diagnosed with ADHD. And so now she wants to know if, now that he's catching up to where he should be, if there is ADHD, because he's very active still. However, after the tumor was removed, he didn't have any chemo or anything, but now he's been gaining weight, and he doesn't eat, he eats very well. He very much monitors what he eats. And so now that's the next concern that they're trying to deal with, is how did that affect that? And is that going to be a lifetime struggle now? Did it change too much? Was he young enough for it to be okay? And so those are some of their long-term, they're trying to figure that part out with all the doctors. So any questions? And talk about, what do you guys think about that? Everybody's on silent.
Okay, so my question is what actually kind of clued mom and dad into whether or not he was a special needs, or if there was a problem? Was it somebody who said it, or was it a doctor, or was it just something that mom and dad led up to?
It was a combination. So the parents both had started working in education. So, they knew things to look for. But between the preschool and the doctor, like I said, the doctor had her filling out paperwork all the time and seeing what he could do, and then it was more thoroughly. And that's when that began. The tumor part, they didn't realize was a tumor, because then he started throwing up a lot. Then they finally figured that part out. But the developmental delays, when the doctor would ask questions and she would answer them and, test them further and further. And so that's when, and then in the preschool, when the teacher started working with him, they're like, this is what's going on. These are the developmental delays. So it was definitely a combination of different parts to get to that point.
And how old was he when he first started
He was
signs? Did you say he was in preschool?
3.5, 4. It's 3.5 is when they started noticing, more developmental delays, and then 4 is when they found the tumor finally.
Question: what kind of reactions did you get from other people, other parents, and did that affect kind of like her acceptance? Does that make sense? My question.
It does. It does. Yes, because
Yes.
that is a huge, huge part. Other people were always very supportive. Just you get either she would get one, like her sister was like, "There's nothing wrong. This is just normal. It's fine. There's nothing wrong." But she's like, "Okay, that, I would like him to be able, to give him tools to be able to move on in life, not just be okay with floundering around." And a lot of her friends were very, let's, help you out. What do we need? How, I understand. Like she would find out how different people had different situations in their lives. So therefore there was compassion, because, some people, like you said, have autism, or there's other learning disabilities, or child with sign language, or a preemie. People had these different stories. So she didn't feel like there was something terribly wrong with her. It was just they're normal, and other people around him were very accepting and helping them.
Good, because some people. Does he have? I'm going to assume that you know this child, but does he have like a look where you look at him and you go, there's something off, or does he look normal, and it's not until he starts interacting that you notice that something's a little different?
When you look at him, you don't. When you talk to him is where the difference is, because he'll talk very quickly, but like I said, his speech still needs, he needs to work on it. If you're around him, you understand what he's talking about, but when you first meet him, you're like, there's something. But then again, his parents call him Zipperhead because of where they had to cut. and he keeps his hair short, and so you can see the scars. And so they don't want him to be self-conscious of it, so they kind of just make it funny for him. And he, he's a boy. He thinks it's hilarious. And so, that does, people are kind of like, but the way his parents handle it, like, yeah, we know he's a zipper head. And so then that catches them off guard, like, oh. And so it opens the conversation up. And then on they go.
Oh, that's funny.
You had a really good example of a child with an ongoing condition.
Like, oh, thanks.
Was that unnecessarily a prerequisite for who you were interviewing? Because I feel like the person who I interviewed didn't have something quite as big as that.
No, it was just the first one that popped into my head. I just I have different friends that I've talked to, and like I have a friend with a son who's autistic, and it was very hard for her to accept that. And that was one route. And then I have other friends with other physical disabilities. One girl, her it's genetic, but like her one leg does not grow as fast as the other one, so it's a form of dwarfism, and they have to do these surgeries and things. But this one to me was more interesting because they weren't really sure what it was, and then at 4, and how something like the tumor would affect long term, but then trying to understand. It's just interesting to be able to watch him over the years. So it's been 4 years since the tumor, to see where he's at, and then to watch from there. And so.
Okay, so with his speech delays, did they use like picture icons or just sign, or did they even use a pod book with him?
I'm not sure the pod book. They've done, he had started off recognizing pictures and, symbols and signs. And then they were trying to find out how many words he could say, and, start listening to those words to try to pick out the syllables.
So it was like a combination of all.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. I have to say, I'm having such a hard time keeping my mouth shut and not putting personal information in here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
So if you see me choking a little bit, it's okay. It's like, yeah, I had a son with brain tumor, but not that kind of situation. So I understand the whole zipper head thing, and yeah.
I know we just had a student that just went through that, and he had a tumor just removed from his brain about 3 months back. So I get the zipper head.
Yeah, yeah, you have to have the sense of humor. You do.
You do.
It sounds like it's really cool. Like these parents have that sense of humor, and they've accepted, and it may be a blessing for their family that they have the one child so they can concentrate on him and give him the things that he needs. If they were divided, with other children, they may not be able to do that for him. So that might be, as heartbreaking as it might seem at first to only have one, it might be okay for their situation right now. And I hope people are accepting for them, in that sense.
Yeah, and it's just, it's one of those things that they're like trying to accept, like, that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah, it's nice job, Lydia. Nice job.
Very good.
Okay, you ready for this one? Okay. I interviewed a family from my daycare, and just because they're the easiest access, so it's helpful. And it's a single mom, and she has a son that's autistic. And so for her, she said, she doesn't have other children around her to compare to, as far as what's normal and what's not normal. So she said at his first birthday party, she noticed that he didn't know how to interact with the other kids or other people there. And at first I'm thinking, okay, how much interaction does a 1-year-old do? But I can see where, if he sat back or wouldn't make eye contact, or, and she was thinking, well, he just needs some socialization. And so she was going to look for a daycare to put him in a daycare situation. And the little boy has unbeknownst to her, he has a very high pain tolerance level, and she didn't realize that he'd been having multiple ear infections. And so during that second year, they discovered the ear infections, and I think she said he had like 13 in the year. Then they found lots of fluid buildup in his ears, and so he wasn't speaking, and they thought he might be deaf, and they weren't sure. So they thought stuff going on had to do, with speech and hearing loss, and so he qualified for a special preschool here that they have for special needs kids, and they take all kids for speech and autism, and they take the gamut. And so he showed up there when he was 2, and she said it took basically at the first day, the beginning of the second, they realized that it wasn't hearing that he actually was autistic, and at that point she had no way, she didn't know, but it became extremely obvious when he was at the school and around the other children, where the needs were. So he did end up having multiple surgeries, and they took care of, so he can hear. He actually has quite acute hearing, because there's many times he will walk around and hands are over his head, and things are too loud. If you've been around autistic children, that's
it's normal.
Normal for them. And so for her, she wanted to do what's best for him, but at the same time, it was really kind of hard to accept. So she kind of oscillated back and forth. And I guess she said the doctor said at first, like, he's autistic, right? And she's like, no, I don't know that. And the preschool is like, yes, he has autism. And so she's come to terms with it. She is one of the most upbeat, accepting parents I've ever seen. She will get on the floor with all the other kids and just loves them all. And she just says he's perfect the way he is. And she thinks he's easy. And, she'd take two more autistic kids if she had them. And so I love to see her attitude and how she's accepted it. And I've been able to watch some crazy situations this year. There was one where there was a total breakdown of communications at the school, and the little boy got left at the school. The bus took off without him, and I happened to pick up other kids at the school, and I pulled up, and I see him just out there wandering, and there's nobody around, and I'm debating, do I just go grab him? Is somebody actually watching him? I didn't know what was going on. So I got a hold of the supervisor out there. She didn't even know who he was. So I had to let the school know, you've got a special needs kids out here that's nonverbal basically, and nobody's paying attention. And so I ended up bringing him home, and to watch how she handled that, because I'm thinking, good grief, if you wanted to, you've got a major lawsuit on your hands here that they've just, left her child. But she went in and talked to the principal and, had a blessing and decided she wasn't going to go that route. She was just working more on making sure this never happened, not just to her child, but to other children in the situation. And I was just really impressed that instead of her being angry, how she handled it, trying to make it better for everybody. So, I just see her doing her best because this is her normal. Her normal is he puts things in his mouth. He's constantly chewing on things, but not food. She has to blend his food. You have to hand feed him. He's very tactile. We're having lovely potty issues sometimes, and I know, like, here I have to keep trying to explain to the other kids that his brain doesn't work like yours. So his rules are a little different than what you've got, and so it's an interesting situation, but I love watching how she handles it. So did I cover all the points?
Yep.
I think you did.
Okay.
We did.
All right.
So
That's
so with all autistic children, what is his kind of like focus point? Like one autistic child I know, he he loves electronics. Like, oh, I can fix that. I can fix that. And he'll give you all the values and reasons why you should use certain devices. And so
This
have something
boy
like
is-
he likes.
yeah, this little boy is really nonverbal, and he's just finished kindergarten, so there's not any give and take of conversation that he could explain things. Now, when his mom comes in the door, first thing he does is feel her up and find her phone, and then he grabs that phone, and then he's dancing around and screeching and very happy with the phone. So he does love his electronics, but he handles playing by himself very well. He's very organized. He likes to sort. I'll find all of a sudden all the Legos are sorted by colors in places. All of a sudden he might clean up the room. It may not be where I would put it, but he might clean up the room, or he'll play with trains and everything's lined up. So he likes order. He definitely likes order.
And that's totally normal too for that age group. I think lots of kids do that. My 4-year-old does that too.
Yeah.
One thing I've noticed about autistic children is they have a lot of OCD.
Yes.
And because of that, that's why they keep everything like in color and in shape and in size. And when you're doing patterning, you can't do the patterns because they're so OCD that they have to have them in the exact color, the exact same size. Doing a pattern with them is really, really hard, but they're normal.
Well, and I can kind of get that, if it just seems like that's a way for them to handle their world. Because our world is very chaotic, and there's lots of information coming in all the time, and it's such an overload for them. Especially with the sounds when they can't filter out background noise and everything's just coming at them. I can see how being able to create order and having things neat and lined up and where it is would help. That's just my take. No education in that department.
So is he overly sensory sensitive at all, or is it just?
There are definitely tactile things. Like I know when he's stressing out, he's got to sit on somebody's lap and play with their hair. He's got to touch the hair. He's got to pull the hair. So we did that the first week he was here. We did a lot of lap sitting, and my hair was very, very well petted. Now that doesn't happen very often, but he's very tactile as far as food. There's very few things that he will feed himself. He might grab an apple. Just recently, he might actually eat a melon, or it's chicken nuggets or fries, and that's kind of about it. If it's yogurt, then you have to spoon feed the yogurt. If it has fruit in it, it's a no-go. Oatmeal, no way. So he's very tactile that way. As far as touching things, I haven't noticed too much in toys or things like that, but I know he's always has to be something in his mouth chewing, and those rubber tires off the cars really scare me. He's got that in his mouth. I don't think I've ever had a kid chew the tires on cars as much as he does. He will pull them off, and they're just, things have been decimated by his chewing. But I'd rather see him have a big plastic fruit in his mouth than something small. But not. He doesn't have to walk around with a blanket or things like that. So, if that answers.
Have his parents changed their lifestyle? Did his mom change, travel or activity they like to do?
Well, Dad's not in the picture, and I know there are things that she has to change. She says he has to be in bed at 8:30, so she's at home in bed by 10, and I think she would like to party a little more. She's a little bit of a party girl. So that's held her back. She does have her mom and a niece that lives with her, and so they help. But where she's supposed to travel for work, it makes it a big issue, because then she has to try and figure out care for her son. And who's going to have him, who's going to pick him up, how do we keep his schedule as normal as possible, because he needs the order. and he needs that routine. And so there are times that she could have taken him straight to school, but she brings him here, lets him get on the bus because that's part of the routine. And if you take him straight to school, that throws him off. So she does have to adjust her life to make sure she can keep his routine for him.
Thanks, Joanne.
Yeah. Okay.
I guess it's my turn.
Yes.
So the mom that I talked to, she has 3 children, and they don't have special needs or anything, but she did have her youngest, her baby went through a small health condition. Lisa talked about it a little bit with her interviewee, had ear infections, but that's what this mother who I was interviewing, her baby had multiple ear infections over and over and over. And it was really hard because it was an infant and her baby wouldn't sleep. And so it threw them off, everybody. Basically, all the parents weren't sleeping. She wasn't sleeping. They were going back and forth to doctors. I think she was on 8 or 9 different antibiotics, like ongoing. It never went away. So it was really hard to do that, to be going back and forth to the doctor and getting another antibiotic and then finishing it. And she's still not sleeping. She's still in pain. She's still not better. After, I want to say, the 8th antibiotic, they went to a specialist and had her ears looked at, and basically they talked to them about having a surgery to get tubes put in her ears, which I know is routine. I think a lot of people have that happen. But anyway, she went in and did the surgery, and basically they go into her ear and drain out all that extra fluid. So I guess the antibiotics, according to what she was telling me, the antibiotics were helping. They just weren't getting rid of that fluid because of the shape of her ears. Some kids are born with just differently shaped ear canals, I guess. And when that is the case, fluid can't drain out of their ears. And so it gets stuck back there, and that's where the multiple ear infections that don't go away. And so anyways, the surgery is that they drain out all that fluid that's been building up there for months, and then they put tiny tubes in the ears so that when she does have another ear infection, which she probably will because she's prone to them because of her ear shape, it'll just drain out. I know that was just a challenge that they went through, especially the mother. And then also the baby, she was 9 months old, so she was at a critical period for speech development. That's kind of when babies are starting to babble, goo goo, gaga. Anyways, so she couldn't hear for months because she was just in so much pain and so much buildup. So that's something that they're looking for with the pediatrician in the future, to see if she's going to develop problems from that, from not basically being able to hear for a long time. I can't remember what other questions I'm supposed to answer.
How did the parents feel? Were they uncomfortable? Did they deny it?
Yeah, I think it was probably hard to accept, especially the surgery. I remember she was telling me about the surgery was just scary. It's scary to take your kid into surgery, no matter what's going on, especially your baby. She was really sad that her baby, she had to fast. So her poor baby, who isn't sleeping and crying and nursing all night long, she couldn't nurse her baby the whole night. So the baby had to fast before the surgery, which was hard for her. So she was really nervous about the surgery. She was grateful for it though afterwards. I know it was a really hard experience, but afterwards she was really relieved and grateful that they were able to get it done and that her baby could get relief and could hear again. and solve that issue that was going on.
So is your idea of normal now different?
Yeah, definitely. I think they're going to notice a big difference. Hopefully, their baby will start to sleep. I know that's probably the hardest part. So, yeah.
Okay. So it sounds like they do have like long term that they need to look at for her.
Mhm.
Do-
Oh yeah, she did talk about because the baby hasn't been sleeping. They have to like start sleep training all over again because she's become so accustomed. Even though she's not in pain anymore, she's still waking up at night like all the time because she's made it basically. It's like a habit. It's been a learned behavior now. So they have to readjust all of that.
So will she have to continue to go to the specialist?
Yeah, they have to have checkups. I want to say she said it was every 6 months. They have to go and check and make sure that your tubes are in place. They last for 12 to 18 months, so it'll fall out on its own after a while.
So how old is the baby now?
The baby is 10 months old.
Okay, so they won't really know on speech for a while yet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that'll be different and fun. And it's got to be hard on the entire family, an adjustment for the entire family when you have a baby that's not sleeping and it's crying all the time, and then the parents are exhausted and not available because they're always concerned about. So I would imagine that their normal changed quite a bit during that time.
Well, and not only that, with having to have the ear problem with always having to have the hearing impacted and then having to have tubes, that can actually delay the speech patterns. It did on my son. He had, I think, about 12 different pairs of tubes in his ears before they finally said no.
Wow.
They were done.
Yes.
And it impacted his hearing. He has a 10% hearing loss.
So he had to have the surgery and put tubes in 12 times?
12 times, yes.
So you know everything that I was just talking about.
Yeah, I do. I can totally relate to that.
So
And it has delayed speech, so yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Dang. That's a whole nother ball of wax right there too.
Oh, that's intense.
Yeah. It's not fun.
You know, if anything from all of these, and I know we still haven't heard from you, Susan, but when you hear all of these things and that it seems like there is no real normal, you know, normal is whatever problems or challenges that we have. And, you know, and we adjust and make that what we do in our family. But it to me, it brings back how much we should not compare ourselves with others. You know, don't compare your children to other people's children, or even the other children in your family, because we are all so different. We all have our different issues. And it just reminds me of the gospel teaching is like, don't judge. You're not there. You don't know. Just, you know, there is no normal. Just, you know,
that's true.
As best we can. So,
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm good sermonizing.
Go, Susan.
Well, it's funny that we were just discussing that. The person that I talked to, she has 2 special needs children, and she's always asking me, is this normal? And I'm like, you're asking me. This is my normal. Basically, because in my family, it's normal. I grew up with it. And then where I work, to me, it is normal. With her children, she has 2 special needs children. Both of them are sensory deficient. They are very much, they just can't handle textures. They can't handle sounds. One of them is currently, he just turned 5.5, and the other one just turned 9. So there is a difference between the 2. The one that's the youngest one, he has a thing with sounds, and he also suffers from great anxiety. He's also borderline Asperger's, and borderline autistic, but they didn't want to label him. He also had a very short speech delay, and they thought maybe it was because he had some ear infections, but they weren't severe enough to be able to determine whether or not it was. Her daughter is doesn't have speech, but her daughter started speaking on time. Her son refused to speak until he was almost 3 years old. But his older sisters would read his face and tell mom what he wanted. So that way she kind of missed the signs a little bit. He has very sensitive sound to sounds. You could take him into a classroom where there's like 9 or 8 people and they're talking, and he has a meltdown. So they go around and they have earphones for him, and he wears earphones all over. He's not very, I mean, he doesn't have a whole lot of PT problems. He started walking on time. His speech is very much delayed, and by the time mom figured it out, I think it was like 1.5 years. She became very concerned, and he started off with, well, just because of my training, I was able to identify for her that she needed some help. So I was able to give her a pod book and a thing called PECS. That's reading by pictures, if you don't know what that is. And he was able to communicate that way with her. They would exchange a picture for what he wanted. And then she was able to get him into some speech, and the speech teacher would come to their home. I think she had him coming 3 times a week. And between the PECS and a pod book and the speech, he is now currently speaking, and we can't get him to be quiet now, which is probably a good thing. Like I said, her daughter never had that problem, so that's a good thing as well. Although she, at this point, has digestive problems. She has tied bowel syndrome on top of anxiety. And she is borderline, I think they decided autistic, but they were still kind of in the talking stages of that one. She has to have daily flushes. So basically that ties mom and dad down quite a bit. I think they were more accepting to her having tied bowel syndrome and having to do a flush through a Mickey button every day than they were to their son's autistic anxiety, Asperger's. They're still accepting that one. But they're far more accepting to it than their families. Their families are looking at them like, well, there's nothing wrong with the kids. And so just recently they were at a family outing, and they decided to target her kids as for water games as they walked through a door. And then they couldn't understand why the children had major meltdowns, and they had to go to leave the situation because it was, they're like, well, we can't do this. This is not fair. We just want to include them. And the family was like, no, the kids can't. They don't accept, and they can't understand why they're, they're just seeing it as meanness and bullying. And the family was really upset with that. And they were like, well, no, your kids are normal. There's nothing wrong with them. And they're not accepting to the needs of these children. So they don't go see the family very often, which is kind of hard because they grew up in strong families that did everything together. So, and my friend she's like one of 9, so that makes it really hard. Also, both kids are in regular school, but again, they each have an extra aide in the classroom for just their needs, because if the Nicky falls out, they have like a 15-minute window. They have to call mom, and they have to get it replaced back in 15 minutes. If not, then they have to have surgery. I don't know if you guys know what a Nicky button is, but it's a button that's stuck in the stomach or into the gut, and they have to put like an IV back attached to it. And they have to, for her, they put in a water solution every day, just so that way her bowels can move every day. If she misses one, she gets compacted enough to where they have to hospitalize her and go through and do a major drainage. So it's been, it really ties them down for 45 to an hour every single day just to take care of
Does
that.
she have to have it with her constantly? Like, is it always like an all-day thing that they carry around, or is it just a once a day?
It's just a once a day. It used to be 3 times a day. So because they were consistent enough with it, they were they are down to 1 a day. And then the little girl, she used to really hate having to do it to where it scared her, that she talked mom into, okay, now we pray before we attach it, and the little girl actually now attaches it herself. So, which is good, but it's also given them an increased amount of faith in order to take care of it. They both sleep really well through the night, and both also with the eating. He's a great eater. He's kind of picky in what he eats. The girl, she's been marked as failure to thrive. She won't eat beyond maybe 2 or 3 bites, and then she's like, she's done. So they're having to constantly make sure they're eating, and it's all day long that they're eating all day. So it's like, to most of us, it's like, picking and eating all, like a little snack here and there. But for her, that's like a whole meal takes 3 to 4 hours, because she's failure to thrive, and it's not good. But she's at least healthy, but at the same time, she's underweight, undersized because of the side bowel syndrome. The boy, though, he eats like there's no tomorrow, and he'll eat his sister's leftovers at any given time. So they have to kind of watch that one. I don't see their speech is, she said that the oldest one did do speech, but she didn't have speech for any more than 6 months. Where her son, they did speech from the age of 3, and he is still doing ongoing speech a little bit. But yeah, he still chatters nonstop, which is actually, we don't stop him from speaking because we just love to hear him talk. He's very tactile deficient sometimes. He doesn't like, if you were to hand him, say, Play-Doh, he's like, no, not doing it. But if you hand him slime, you have a good chance, but don't count on it. He hates sand because it's too gritty. But again, he doesn't like loud sounds. He does have his earphones with him. The school is not too thrilled with the earphones. They will not use the earphones in a regular classroom, and they won't allow him to do that. I guess it depends on the teacher, and they're still having ongoing talks with that. In the end, I have a feeling she's going to probably end up having to pull them from regular school and homeschooling, and she's still on the fence about that one. Both kids were easy to potty train, or at least as much as with tied bowel syndrome you can potty train. I guess she had the oldest one completely potty trained until they noticed there was a problem with the bowels, and it backslid. Even now, they have to kind of, go in every 35 minutes to let her in to go to the bathroom. And that's been an ongoing issue with the school as well, because they're like, well, no, she needs to be in a desk. And mom and dad are going, you need to allow her to go when she has to go. You got to let her go, because if not, there's going to be a problem, and the school has not been very receptive.
Sad.
Yeah, it's public school. I don't know what else to tell you there.
That just seems like one of those things where, well, mainstreaming at some point seems good, but sometimes mainstreaming is not the way to go, because when they have these needs, these special needs, it does, especially when you just have one teacher in the class, what is she supposed to do? These kids leaving the class constantly, but yet she's got 30 other kids she's got to take care of. It makes it really difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But I would think with an IEP that they might give her child an aid, or that, the IEP, the earphones might stop to be an issue,
She has called for IEPs for both of them, and they went in to discuss an IEP, And because there are certain levels that you have to meet with point system or point value system as to whether or not they are high enough on the point system as to whether or not the IEP will stand, and whether or not the accommodations can be acceptable to the IEP as well as the points as to how they are measured. And because neither child hit the right amount of points on an IEP that was being put in place, neither IEP stood.
That's
Wow.
interesting.
Yeah. So the services they get is if the teacher is allowable, all they could do is put a suggestion in their QMs. And it's like the allowable suggestion was to allow this child to be able to leave the classroom, just to hold up a sign. And if it's convenient for the teacher, or if the teacher sees it soon enough, then it's got to be a real emergency. They'll let her leave the room. For the earphones, it's a suggestion that if it's going to be a real loud thing, like an assembly, okay, the teacher will allow the earphones. But it's only in a suggested state because, like I said, they didn't reach enough points to be able to have an IEP.
Yeah, that's
And
interesting because we have students with diabetes with IEPs, and we have all of our autistic students have IEPs. Like, it's interesting from state to state how they differ.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's say they said, unless the doctor himself, and this is how the school put it, unless they have a form with the doctor itself labeling the child as, and not borderline, then they can have, it reaches enough points. But if it does not come from the doctor stating and labeling, then it just stays a suggestion in a queue. So
Interesting.
anyway, so did I hit all the points? I hope.
Yes.
Yeah.
So do you think?
Normal is a difficult normal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But like I said, she's always asking me, is this normal? And I'm like, you're asking me, this is my normal. So to me, I work in, I have two other callings, and to me, because I work in the nursery at church, and then I work as childcare minder for the addiction recovery. To me, that is normal. Well, abnormal children. I work with autism and children with Down syndrome and children with sensory issues all the time. So to me, that is my normal. My own siblings, they're mentally unstable, literally, with schizophrenia and ADD and ADHD. So with her, to me, when she asks me, is this normal? I'm like, to me, this is normal. I wouldn't know what normal is. So,
Yeah, I wonder if we should change that word normal to typical. You know,
yeah.
because normal makes it sound like, if there's something different, then there's something wrong with you. Maybe typical is a better word. It's just, kind of.
And knowing these things and seeing all these things around us, I feel like that's what we need to teach our children
Mm-hmm.
to accept. If they're not like you, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
These, whether it's, like you said, like hearing or your speech or your body doesn't work the way everybody else's body does. I think that would really, when you talked about her family not accepting that her kids have something different and that they're trying to treat them like they're normal, like their own children normal, what are they teaching? Like, okay, target those children. Instead, they need to say, okay, how do we help your children feel part of this family? How do we,
Mm-hmm.
Don't judge because you're not walking in their shoes. And
Exactly.
so they alienate. They don't know they're alienating. They're not trying to alienate, but yet they're alienating them.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like in our society, that's something we need to understand is, what was it in this? We're talking about, just because somebody looks fine on the outside, you don't understand what's going on. And you can see, the whole understanding, like them as they mature, it is different for everybody. Everything we've read, every child matures differently at different times and rates. And we'd all like to believe they're all right there in that average, and there are people who want their kids to be the above average. And I always ask, when did A become average? It's It's okay.
Mhm.
You know, average is okay, but everyone's, trying to do their best. And you can see how all these little things affect our children. You don't always notice it, but these are big things. And hearing is a big thing, but there are little things that we don't always take into account, where they can mature differently. It's not just educationally, but even socially, or comprehending math. Come on. They're all,
Mhm.
very different. And you can see how we need to just be accepting of every child in any situation. And I think that's the hardest thing with public education, is focusing on what is best for this child. It's just what's best for this classroom, and
Mhm.
then move on. And that's hard. And I wish we could have the society where we can look at each child and say, okay, let's make a plan that's best for you to understand and to learn. Because even sitting in a desk is hard. Some kids need those little yoga balls.
The fidget spinners.
Oh,
I'd like to ban those from my classroom.
It reminds me of what you were saying, Lydia. It reminds me of that presentation the video that we did last week, the Train the Trainer.
Mhm.
Just all those children who struggle with like the social self-regulating. And
wasn't
like
that fascinating?
that blew my mind how he talks about the friendship crisis and how like all these kids are failing because they can't make friends and they can't be accepted in social situations. Like it's really sad.
Yeah. And I loved how he talked about, we used to go out and have to negotiate. We would go play for hours outside, and we had to negotiate. We didn't just play video games. We had to, play games and figure it out. And so I feel like, because there are learning disabilities that are genetic, definitely many
Mhm.
genetic, but they're more prevalent now, I think, because we're more, sit around society now instead of get out and do. And we don't have the social events that they used to have, when they're all farmers. They'd all, at this time we're going to be meeting, like everybody comes and we meet. And
We're all socially connected
yeah,
online, but we're not actually connected, you know?
yeah.
It's true.
And so you see that, you're like, huh.
Mhm. It's true.
Yeah, that was a fascinating to watch and to learn so much.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
appreciate it. I actually watched the whole thing twice. I felt like, oh my gosh, I'm starting to get and understand, and that's fascinating. And I've seen that before, and yeah, I loved that. I need to like copy that site and just watch this over and over to remind myself, because we forget,
Yeah.
how hard
Mhm.
it is for kids that just don't get the social cues. And so yeah,
So one
that I love that.
Mhm.
See, that, for me personally, that video proved what I've always believed. Like, I'm an adult and my job is to teach my children. Like, that is what comes first as a parent, is I'm trying to help my children learn to function, to be able to work in a society, to be a part of it. And
Mhm.
watching that, you're like, he knows, we need to teach this socialization. And I don't think it's just to those children. I think it's also to the ones who like to be mean, or the ones
It's
who
true.
just don't know. And as adults, I feel like many people are like, well, it's my time and I need to be happy. I'm like, but you had a child that you need to teach to be
Mhm.
able to function in society.
I
And
have a I have a son who actually my own son. He's the only son I have. He can't handle social situations. He can't handle groups of larger than 3 people. So putting him in preschool was a nightmare. Uh, Putting him in first grade, the teacher told me a week and a half into the school year, she knew my child better than I did and couldn't understand why he was not coping. And I was like, he doesn't do the social thing. I ended up homeschooling him because of that. Um, he ended up going to seminary. He was the only kid in seminary early morning on top of that had an IEP. He would go to seminary. His job was to get a desk, sit it outside the door where he could see the teacher and 2 students. And that was how he was able to participate. But his job was to go in and do that and say hello to 2 people. That was all he had to do. And that was the only way, that was the only thing that got him through Institute. And his friends, they were really awesome friends. Notice this, and they would tag team each other. And every day, each one of them would go out and sit in the hallway with him. And they would bring him like sunglasses and all that. And they would just go out and they would do a seminary with him. So that way he was feeling included, but he wasn't feeling non-social. To this day, they still do that. They'll call him and say, okay, we're doing the socials thing. There's 3 of us. I have the earphones. I have the sunglasses. We're going to go to In-N-Out. We're going to go there at 10 o'clock because there's not that many people there. We're going to go bowling. Again, they'll go at 10 o'clock, just to accommodate him. And it's awesome. But, we've had to teach him how to cope. And his coping thing was the earphones and the sunglasses. And that's what they do, and that's what he still does now. His job is repetitive because he has a learning disability, and his boss learned on early on, okay, I'm going to give you to repair things repetitively, and it's the way we teach them to cope, and it's the only way to go. And if we teach our own children this, we can teach other children, or other families to do the same thing. It's just, it takes time, sadly. And a lot of families aren't always receptive.
I love those friends that he's got. He's really blessed, and that just makes my heart happy. It makes me want to cry that they've taken the time to know him and love him enough to do that. That's amazing. Now that's charity. That is.
That is. Well, it's funny. Each one of them almost all of his friends have gotten married in the temple, and each one of them refused to even enter the temple doors unless he was standing there with them. And they actually would take him in, and they would go in with him into the temple, and they would go into the room, and they would hand him his sunglasses and his earphones, and they were like, we're not getting married unless he's in this room.
Oh.
And when he went and got his endowments, it was so funny because all of his friends were in Idaho at the time, and he didn't know it. And when he came back to get his when he was here, he went to get his endowments. He was kind of sad because none of his friends were here. They met him in this celestial room, or not in the celestial room, into the endowment room, and they were all lined up there, and they went with him through his endowments as a surprise for Christmas.
Made me cry.
So he has been very blessed with the best friends that he could have ever had, and they're pretty cool.
Yeah. Okay. Now you got me.
Sorry.
But in a good way. It makes me happy.
Mm-hmm. So these kids, they can learn to cope, but at the same time, it's got to start when they're little. So yeah,
it's fantastic. Okay, so who would like to summarize? You just summarize.
I think that's you as the lead. You summarize. And, yeah.
No. Well, I know one of you guys suggested you would summarize, wasn't it? It was one of the Lydias. I know it was one of you.
Yeah, I personally, I was taking, you've got the lead, you summarize. I'm bidding. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
So what we've come down to is if I'm wrong, let me know, that we all believe there's no actual normal, that children have different times when they are able to achieve, and we need to help them with those disorders, even if it's a tick. Sorry, personal, my son will walk through the house and just go, out of the blue, just start making this noise. And, to just carry on, because that is their normal. They don't always realize. We need to definitely work with children and help them and teach our own children who don't, like, how many times have we heard a child struggling to read and someone's like, oh, that's easy. Well, just because it's easy for you, then help somebody else. There's nothing better than a peer helping another. They're more willing to learn when it's somebody their age that cares and shows that care for them. We find that people love each other, and if we understand that it's a greater blessing to everybody around them. Again, the patterns we're seeing is these are things unexpected. They come along, and as difficult as any of these situations may seem to be, I feel like the parents rise to the occasion, and they do what they need to do. They learn to work with what they have and are always seeking answers, and they try very hard to help get them where they need to be, to figure out what is the long-term plan, because there does come to that point when you realize this is long-term. Even Lydia, even your friend with the hearing, like that's a long-term, that's a long-term issue. Those are huge for her, because they don't know how it's affecting their child, and they're going to need that extra, maybe they need 20 minutes more of reading every day more than everyone else.
I just want to add really quick. I know we talked about normal. I think as parents, we need to also, I love what we're saying about loving and accepting and adjusting to our new levels of normal, but I think we also do need to be aware what is normal developmentally. Like, is my child or is this child that I'm taking care of or watching, are they doing normal things developmentally, or do they need extra help, or do we need to talk to a doctor or a specialist or something like that? I think it's important for us to be aware what is the actual level of normal, even though I love what we're saying about adjusting to our new levels of normal and loving and accepting and helping children who aren't. So just wanted to add that in.
No, and that's very true, because how else do you know that, okay, this child isn't speaking where they should be, or you're physically unable, like my one of my nephews, of knowing when his parents figured out, like, oh, he needs to work on, other things. You have to know a normal. If you don't know the normal, then you don't know, okay, this is something different.
Mm-hmm.
And to where that level is. And that is why we do have those. It's the one thing, it's like tests. We all hate the testing in school. But the truth is, we have to have an idea where we're at in order to improve, or see, okay, we're doing this correctly, but we need to improve X, Y, and Z. And if we don't have a basis or a summary of that, then it's very difficult. I wish there was an easier way to do that, a better way. But yes, so we do need those in there, and we do need to know where those things lie. And that's why when you go to the doctor, they're like, okay, for this age, you should be about here. And so, those are very important things. And that's just one of those things, again, of trying to think of all the different options, of just being open to know where we need to be and how to work with those children and the families, and adjusting so they can become better, so they can mature, so they can perform tasks, so they can get jobs. And we want our children to be able to succeed beyond us and do it any way we can possibly. So, anybody else like to add?
I think you covered it. Did a good job. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lydia, for reminding us.
Yeah, and the only thing I'm going to add is that, just in case they need that, is that we're Group 10. We have Lydia Murphy, Lydia Morris, Susan Shepard, and Lisa Gonzalez. So that way, hopefully, we all get credit for this.
Yes. So, sounds great.
All right. Well, okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop